and attempts to unilaterally alter the status quo are in violation of the bilateral agreements, reiterates that Indian troops have taken responsible approach towards border management but are also determined to protect India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Raksha Mantri also advises troops on both sides to take guidance from the consensus of the leaders for further development of bilateral relations and that both sides should not allow differences to become disputes. President Ramnath Kovind presents National Teachers Awards to 47 distinguished teachers. Says teachers are at the center of fundamental changes envisaged by the national education policy. Narcotics Control Bureau produces Riya Chakravarti's brother Shaumik and Sushant Singh Rajput's former manager Samuel Miranda before court today. Deepesh Sawant is likely to be made an approver in the case. CBI team visits Sushant Singh Rajput's residence. Health Ministry issues updated testing advisory. Guidelines provide for on-demand testing without prescription in order to ensure higher levels of testing, gives more freedom and flexibilities to state authorities to facilitate enhanced ease of testing for people. With higher number of patients getting cured, India's total recoveries surpass 31 lakh with over 77% recovery rate. Case fatality rate further goes down to 1.73%. Over 10 lakh 50,000 tests conducted in the last 24 hours, with the total number of tests now nearing 4.7 crore. Hello and welcome. You're watching DD News and DD India with me, Munmun Bhattacharya. Our top story: Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh met State Councillor and Defence Minister of China, General Wei Fenghe, yesterday in Moscow on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. And in a series of tweets, Rajnath Singh said that the two ministers had frank and in-depth discussions about the developments in India-China border areas as well as on India-China relations. Raksha Mantri categorically conveyed India's position on the developments along the line of actual control, including in the Galwan Valley in the western sector of the India-China border areas in the last few months. Raksha Mantri emphasized that the actions of the Chinese troops, including amassing of large number of troops, their aggressive behavior and attempts to unilaterally alter the status quo, were in violation of the bilateral agreements. RM stated clearly that while the Indian troops had always taken a very responsible approach towards border management, but at the same time there should also be no doubt about a determination to protect India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. RM said that both sides should take guidance from the consensus of the leaders that maintenance of peace and tranquility in the India-China border areas was essential for further development of bilateral relations and that the two sides should not allow differences to become disputes. He further advised that it was important, therefore, that the Chinese side should work with the Indian side for complete disengagement at the earliest from all friction areas, including Pangong Lake, as well as de-escalation in border areas in accordance with the bilateral agreements and protocols. RM further said that the current situation should be handled responsibly and that neither side should take any further action that could either complicate the situation or escalate matters in the border areas. Raksha Mantri conveyed that the two sides should continue their discussions, including through diplomatic and military channels, to ensure complete disengagement and de-escalation and full restoration of peace and tranquility along the LAC at the earliest. So a series of tweets coming in from the Defence Ministry on what Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh has said in the meeting that happened with his Chinese counterpart in Moscow on the sidelines of the SCO Defence Ministers meeting that is ongoing there. And Strategic Affairs expert Harsh Vardhan Pant is now joining us for his perspective on this developing story. Well, Dr. Pant, Welcome to DD India and DD News. If you're with us, let me read out some of the tweets that have been put out by the Defence Ministry. One of them is that discussions, both military and diplomatic, must continue to complete disengagement and de-escalation, and there should be full restoration of peace and tranquility along the LAC at the earliest. And the other being that neither side should take any further action that could either complicate the situation or escalate matters in border areas, and the current situation should be handled responsibly. Would you say that this is yet another firm statement from the Indian side, after especially what Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla had said, that the situation in the border areas there, particularly along the LOC, is unprecedented since 1962?
Yes, I think it's a very important signal, both to the Chinese side in terms of its intent as to what India possibly wants to do, as well as its ability to have a conversation with the Chinese on matters most pressing on the border along the border. So I think what India is trying to do is, at this point in time, be very firm with the Chinese and tell them that there is a fundamental problem here which needs to be resolved. And China has to show its benign intent if this process needs to move forward of engagement. But at the same time, India is very clear that status quo ante needs to be restored, and that engagement with the China can only happen if the border situation is normalized, and China has to take the onus for that and to be the first mover in terms of that.
Fair enough. Would you say that India has been resisting, Chinese attempts to unilaterally change the status quo, and we've seen that quite evidently in the last few days, particularly since the last weekend?
Yes, I think the fundamental problem that China seems to be, that India has been facing, is that China is trying to make a case for negotiations. Even while having these negotiations, China has been intent on altering the status quo. You can go back to the Galvan Valley incident, as well as to the recent incident in the southern banks of Pangong Tso Lake. So clearly, I think India has to be on guard, and that's what India did on the night of August 29th and 30th, when Indian soldiers tried to dominate tried to take on the dominating headlines, the mountaintops around Pangong Tso Lake, so that it gains tactical and strategic advantage. Tactical on the ground while dealing with the Chinese militarily, strategic advantage so that the negotiations can now move forward with Chinese under some pressure. So I think India's strategy of mobilizing its forces, of making sure that China does not gain any tactical advantage on the border, at the same time keeping the door open for negotiations at the moment, is very wise, and it is being conveyed in so many words to the Chinese.
Fair enough. There's also news coming in that Indian and Chinese brigade level military talks had begun at 11 this morning. We are aware that several rounds of such military talks and also diplomatic talks have taken place, and it is in that respect that Raksha Mantri says that we should continue these talks to ensure that there is complete disengagement and de-escalation. Would you say that India has to an extent outmaneuvered the Chinese in the recent past?
I think the way India has deployed its diplomatic muscle as well as its military muscle is quite interesting, and I think that has put China on slightly back foot at the moment, because that has made India clearly the prime mover in this engagement. What was happening in the past was that India was responding to what China was doing. Chinese said, initially they started mobilizing forces on the border. Then they said, let's have negotiations, and India entered into negotiations. And then the Chinese did a Galvan Valley incident. I think now India is intent that won't be repeated. And I think India has taken the initiative in shaping the larger realities around these negotiations. And that, I think, is paying dividends at the moment.
And do you think that the fact that the Chinese side had requested for a meeting with our Defence Minister Rajnath Singh in Russia also goes on to show that the Chinese did feel the pressure, particularly after the recent developments, and also the statement from the Indian side that it won't be business as usual any longer, and that you can expect the bilateral relationship to go on as usual only if there is peace and tranquility in the border areas, which is not the case now?
I think, Chinese were under this misunderstanding that India would buckle in, that eventually the negotiations could go on. It will happen because it would be Indians that would be pressurized to an extent that they would have no option but to negotiate. And India has shown that that's not the case, that India will stand its ground, India will take the battle to the Chinese, and India will make sure that Chinese are equally under pressure. And that's why when India started controlling the domineering heights around Pangong Tso Lake, it gave India a tactical advantage, which allowed India to make a case for negotiations, and therefore you saw Chinese calling for this meeting with the Raksha Mantri. And I think going forward, that is likely to be India's posture because the trust level with China has completely broken down. I don't think any policymaker in India today trusts the Chinese to do the right thing or that to pursue negotiations in good faith. And I think that's going to be the biggest issue going forward. And that's why India will have to keep its powder dry. India will have to make sure that both its military and diplomatic arsenal is fully mobilized and that it is pursuing negotiations not simply for the purpose of pursuing negotiations, but to achieve certain concrete outcomes. And that is why I think the message that is coming out both from the Raksha Mantri, from Foreign Minister, as well as from Foreign Secretary in recent days have been quite striking.
Absolutely, and we saw how the Army Chief and the Indian Air Force Chief were there in the Chushul area and tried to assess our preparedness, particularly with the winter months coming now, and it's going to be extremely inclement there, to say the least, in Ladakh in the winter months. So what would the new normal be along the LOC, and for what should India be prepared in future?
I think the new normal along the LAC is going to be that the LAC is going to be, unlike in the past when we used to say, look, LOC is the one that is always problematic. It's the LAC which is stable. I think much like the LOC, LAC will also remain a very hot border for India. But that will be for two reasons. One, of course, Chinese are going to put pressure, along the border as they have been doing in the past few months. But also because India is decided that it is not enough to absorb those, strikes from the Chinese. India will take the battle to the Chinese, and that is what the Indian defense forces have been showing off the Chinese in the recent days. And I think if Chinese are getting the message, it would be particularly clear to them that India will not, back down. India will not buckle down. So I think the message to the Chinese is very clear, both from the diplomatic front as well as from the military front. And if the visits that you were talking about, the CDS as well as the Indian Army Chief, both of them have conveyed a very, very strong message that Indian forces are fully prepared. And Indian forces have much greater experience of fighting during inclement weather compared to the Chinese forces. So I think, the Indian side is making its intent very clear to the Chinese that even as doors for negotiations are open, don't consider this that India would give in militarily, because India is militarily very well prepared.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Harsh Pant, thank you so much for your perspective on this big and developing story. Well, Teachers' Day is being celebrated today in memory of a former president and an academician, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. The day honors teachers for their exemplary efforts in shaping the future of the nation. President Ramnath Kovind virtually conferred the National Teachers Awards to 47 teachers from across the country for their outstanding contribution and notable work. Addressing the event, the President said that every possible step needs to be taken to enable teachers according to the new education policy. He added that the teachers are at the center of fundamental changes envisaged by the National Education Policy.
शिक्षा व्यवस्था में किए जा रहे बुनियादी बदलावों के केंद्र में अवश्य शिक्षक ही होने चाहिए। नई शिक्षा नीति के अनुसार शिक्षकों को सक्षम बनाने के लिए हर संभव कदम उठाए जाने की आवश्यकता है। इस नीति के अनुसार हर स्तर पर शिक्षण के पेशे में सबसे होनहार लोगों का चयन करने के प्रयास करने होंगे। साथ ही शिक्षकों की स्वायत्तता व उनके सम्मानपूर्वक स्थान को सुनिश्चित करने के प्रयास जारी रखने होंगे।
President Kovind also said that online learning has been promoted in the country during the COVID-19 pandemic. He added that it is necessary to ensure that the means of studying through digital medium are available in rural, tribal and remote areas too.
ऑनलाइन शिक्षण को बढ़ावा देने के लिए शिक्षकों को अभिभावकों के साथ भागीदारी करनी होगी, ताकि वे बच्चों के साथ इस प्रक्रिया में सहयोगी बने और उन्हें रुचि के साथ सीखने के लिए प्रेरित भी करें। आप सबको अपने विकास के लिए शिक्षा में हो रहे बदलावों के बारे में जानना होगा और इसके लिए लगातार डिजिटल तकनीक का उपयोग करना होगा। हमें यह भी सुनिश्चित करना है कि डिजिटल माध्यम से पढ़ाई करने के साधन ग्रामीण, आदिवासी और दूर दराज के क्षेत्रों में भी हर वर्ग के हमारे बेटे बेटियों को प्राप्त हो सके।
While addressing the award distribution ceremony, Union Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank said that the Guru Shishya tradition is our identity and everyone praises his Guru. He also said that a teacher stands behind the successful disciple.
मैं इस अवसर पर जबकि इस देश के महान दार्शनिक भारत के पूर्व राष्ट्रपति डॉक्टर सर्वपल्ली राधाकृष्णन जी के जन्मदिन पर अध्यापकों को राष्ट्रीय पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया जाता है, मैं पूरे देशवासियों को और शिक्षक समूह को मैं बहुत सारी बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देना चाहता हूं। गुरु शिष्य परंपरा हमारी पहचान रही है। बड़े से बड़े पद पर सुशोभित व्यक्ति भी अपने गुरु के चरणों में वंदन करता है। निश्चित अच्छे जीवन के लिए अच्छे शिक्षक का होना जरूरी है और हर गुरु का इतिहास एक शिष्य से जुड़ा है और हर सफल शिष्य के पीछे अवश्य एक गुरु खड़ा है।
Union Minister Prakash Javadekar today said that the new education policy is a revolutionary and futuristic policy that has come after 34 years. He was addressing Teachers' Day celebrations at Parle Tilak Vidyalaya in Pune on the subject of the new education policy. The minister said that the aim is to increase the gross enrollment ratio by 50% through implementation of NEP. He said the policy lays special emphasis on research and innovation, which will result into giving a boost to India's Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign. He added this is a progressive policy and welcomed by all.
The education policy is a revolutionary and futuristic policy which will prepare the student to take up the challenges and exploit the opportunities presented by 21st century. And in that, we have definitely taken note of early childhood education, curiosity-based education, inquiry-based education, and then flexibility in education, in-depth knowledge. We want to prepare teachers also with 4-year integrated B.Ed courses. The policy lays emphasis on foundational and numerical literacy. It will reduce curriculum but improve the ability to comprehend and analysis. Critical thinking is the force and the scientific temperament is the base of this policy.
Indian playback singer Asha Bhosle has extended greetings on Teachers' Day. In a tweet, she said, acknowledging the creators of knowledge and wisdom today who give us the stepping stones of our lives. Teachers lay down the foundations for our character, outlook and temperament in life, and we should be ever grateful to them. In a fresh development in Narcotics Control Bureau's probe in drug trafficking connected to Sushant Singh Rajput's death case, the agency produced Riya Chakrabarti's brother Shomik Chakrabarti and Sushant's house manager Samuel Miranda and all other arrested before a court after their medical tests. The arrest was made following a 4-hour raid at their residence in the morning. Their offences falling under Section 27 of the NDPS Act as a non-bailable offence. Narcotics Control Bureau has already made it clear that the agency has strong evidence against the accused and they will make a sustainable case against them in court. The two arrested are co-accused in the FIR filed by the CBI in the Sushant Singh Rajput's death case. However, the NCB has arrested both of them in connection with drug trafficking allegedly linked to this case. Meanwhile, Sushant's house staff Dipesh Sawant is likely to be made an approver or a government witness in this case. He was intensively confronted with Samuel Miranda yesterday. Statement of Dipesh Sawant will be recorded today. Meanwhile, a CBI team today visited Sushant's residence. The team had earlier visited his residence around 4 times. And for more on this, our correspondent Yogesh Sheetal is joining us from Mumbai. Yogesh, there are several facets of the investigation in the Sushant Singh Rajput case. One of them is, of course, the drug peddling angle or the drug connection between the death of Sushant Singh Rajput and, considering the various arrests that have taken place of late. Tell us, where does the investigation as far as drug trafficking link in this case is concerned stands?
See, Munmun, currently the court arguments are currently underway, and defense have in fact concluded the arguments, and now public prosecutor is not now arguing for the custody, basically for the custody by the agency NCB. Now, what remains to be seen that when Rhea is going to be questioned, because already Souvik Chakravarti is the co-accused in this case, and after the arrest of Souvik Chakravarti and Samuel Miranda, now it is expected that NCB can summon Rhea Chakravarti at any time. Hopefully today, what we are getting from the sources in NCB, that today at any time the summon can be served to Rhea Chakravarti to join the probe. Now, what other things that you have also rightly mentioned, that CBI had also again recreated the crime scene around 4 times previously. Also the crime scene has been already recreated at Sushant's residence, where his body was found at Bandra on 14th of June. So now almost CBI and also NCB both are now investigating in this case. As far as ED is concerned, currently there is no questioning in ED, but the WhatsApp messages that were retrieved by the Enforcement Directorate after that the FIR was filed by the NCB. So now the main focus would be, I think the main important thing, the latest update in this case would be the custody, which I think at any time now the custody would be granted to the accused that have been arrested by the NCP, and after the custody has been granted, then it would be very clear that what would be the line of action by the NCP in this case, because now after the custody the formal investigation process would be started now.
Right, Yogesh, Sushant's house staff Dipesh Sawant, we understand, is likely to be the approver of the government witness in this case. What are the chances of that, and when is his statement likely to be recorded today?
See, Dipesh Sawant is one of the key picture in this case, because see, generally we see whenever central agency investigate any case, then generally one accused which is close-eyed of the main accused, or one accused, like in Sina Bora case. In fact, just for example, let me tell you that in Sina Bora case we had seen that Shamwara, who is the driver, the driver was made approver in that case, and later on he explained entire case to the prosecution and also in the court. So in this case also on the same line NCP has adopted the same principle, and now Dipesh Sawant, who is just a house established Sushant residence, has been the NCP is just trying to make him approver in this case. NCP has yesterday already said that the agency is not going to arrest him. So Dipesh Sawant will not be arrested, and definitely he will be prosecution witness, we can say prosecution witness or approver in legal term. So when Dipesh Sawant will be the approver, then Dipesh Sawant definitely has all the knowledge of what's happening in the building, who are the people they were coming to meet Sushant Singh Rajput, what were the transactions, what were the content of communications, what was happening in the house, whether there any reshuffle, whether there any fight on 8th of June that was alleged by some of the theories that have been floated earlier. So number of things Dipesh must know, and Dipesh has already been questioned by the Enforcement Directorate also. So it is expected that Dipesh has a lot of knowledge about the entire thing that was going around that building. So when he becomes an approver, when he becomes an witness from the prosecution side, that will be that will be a moral boost, and that will also be legally a strong point for the prosecution, whether the prosecution would be any agency, whether it is ED or CBI or NCP. The prosecution case would be stronger when Dipesh Sawant will be made approval. So, but he has not been made as of now. But yes, the procedure is underway. Anytime NCB can declare that he will be made approved, because there is a certain procedure in court procedure. Only then it will be approved. Yeah.
Absolutely, Yogesh. That's all the time that we have for this. Thank you for those inputs from Mumbai. So that was Yogesh giving us the latest as far as Sushant Singh Rajput's death case is concerned. That's it then in this news edition. Up next is Dr. Speak. Stay tuned for that.